Welcome back, everyone. Today, here on the Joe Davis Media Channel, I'm sharing a very special episode. It's an episode of my podcast, The Joe Davis Show, where I interview my friend Jeff Foxworthy, and I hope you will get a lot out of it as it's an amazing interview with an incredible individual. And also, if you'd like to hear other episodes of my podcast, just search for Joe Davis Show on Apple or Spotify, as I have several other episodes out there. So thanks for tuning in and hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Joe Davis Show. This is your host, Joe Davis, and I'm delighted to be with you today. And today I'm so excited to be with you because I've got a very special guest, another born and bred Georgia boy like me, Mr. Jeff Foxworthy. And I'm excited to have you on, Jeff, not just because you're a household name, but because I know you're an encourager and um, you want God to use you to bring hope and encouragement to others. And so that's what I hope we can do with this episode. But first, how have you been? We haven't caught up in a while. I know you've been traveling a lot and just got in. What you been up to lately?
Well, I've always traveled a lot. People will say to me, "Are you on tour?" And I said, "Tour implies that it stops at some point." I've pretty much been on tour for 42 years, but I've been great. I view life as seasons of life, and we're kind of going through a dual one now. My mom's almost 89, and she's been in and out of the hospital and had a lot of health problems and kind of facing a lot of that end of life stuff. And then on the other end, I've got two grandkids that I delight in. So it's, trying to help mom walk through this and trying to love on and teach. Do you have grands yet, Joe?
Not yet. I'm praying. I'm praying for them. Both my kids are married, and both said they want to have kids, in God's timing, but not yet.
I will tell you, you get to the point where you kind of think you have life figured out, that there's hilltops and valleys and good times and struggles. I thought I figured it out. I had no idea how much I was going to love my grandkids. It is a make your stomach hurt kind of love. So you got that to look forward to.
Yeah. So you were just out in California, right?
I was doing a bunch of shows for about a week, and it's kind of one of those things that now if I decide to go that far, I decide to might as well do a bunch of them at one time and then come home. So yeah, I got home yesterday evening and be back here for a little bit.
All right. Um, well, one of the objectives of my show, as I said, is to encourage listeners. And I know that sharing about challenges in my own career that I've been through has helped others. So I'm going to put the ball in your court and let you go back as far as you want, into the early 80s, whenever you want to, and share how you got the vision for going into comedy, what led you there, and how you had to grind all those years to get your name out there.
Well, it's funny you say the word encouragement, and you were talking about us both being native Georgians. I grew up in Hapeville, down by the airport, and the biggest thing Hapeville's known for was it was the birthplace of Chick-fil-A. So until I was in high school, we had the only Chick-fil-A on the planet Earth.
Oh,
But I knew Truett Cathy as a little boy. And it's funny how things stick with you. But I remember Mr. Cathy asking me one time, he said, "Jeff, do you know how to tell when somebody needs encouragement?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "If they're breathing." He said, "Everybody needs encouragement, and it doesn't cost you anything to give it to them." And for
wow.
some reason, Joe, that stuck with me my entire life. To see people and everybody you saw to say something kind, or, to tell the busboy, "Man, you do a great job," or to tell the clerk, "Your hair looks great," just to be an encourager. And that stuck with me. And my entire life, I've been that way. I mean, it's just a natural thing is to try to encourage people. Now, growing up in Hapeville, we had the Ford plant. So everybody, you either worked for Delta Airlines because we were right. I grew up literally at the end of the runway. You
Right.
either worked for Delta or the Ford plant growing up in Hapeville. So it never dawned on me that I could do something creative. I mean, in the world I lived in, it was a blue collar world. You went and got a job when you got out of high school. And when I look back, I was always fascinated with comedy. When I was a kid, I would save my allowance and I would buy comedy albums like Bill Cosby and Bob Newhart and Flip Wilson and I'd memorize them and I'd go to school and do them. And I was always the funny kid at school, but it never dawned on me I could do it for a living. And I had a job working at IBM, which sounds more impressive than it was. I carried a tool bag. I repaired broken machines,
Okay.
and but I was the funny guy at work. I was the guy that was in the break room doing impersonations of the boss, and then you would turn around and the boss would be in the doorway. I mean, I was that guy. And a lot of guys I work with would go down to the local comedy club all the time, and they would come back and they would go, Foxworthy, you're funnier than those people. You need to go do this. And they entered me in a contest, not an amateur night, a contest for working comedians called the Great Southeastern Laugh-Off. And of course, I'd been doing everybody else's material, so I had to go sit down and write 5 minutes about my family. But I did, and I went down there, and the first night I did it, I won the contest.
Wow.
And I was scared to death, Joe, but I knew a minute and a half into it. I'm like, this is what I was born to do. This is what I want to do. And I remember when I decided to quit IBM to try it, my mother, her first question was, are you on the dope? Whatever the dope was, she's like, we can get you help. And I'm like, Mom, I'm not on dope. I just think I can do this. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but I did a long time ago. I don't take any pride in being able to do this because I don't know why I can do this. I just can. If you if you sat me down and said, "Hey, write me 20 jokes about being a card collector," I could do it. I could just take a notepad and I don't know why I can do it. So I can't take any pride in it. I believe it's a gift
Yep.
that I was given, just like some people have the gift of taking care of babies, or some people have the gift of building a stone wall, or some people, it's taking care of old people. It was just my gift. And I honestly didn't think that it was going to work. I mean, I figured I'd get away with it for a few years and then I'd have to come back with my hat in my hand and beg for my job back.
Right.
But at least I'd have a cool story to tell my grandkids one day that, hey, I was a comedian for a few years. And that was 42 years ago. But it was funny when I quit my job at IBM, it was 1984. I think I was making $32,000 a year. And my first year of doing comedy, I found remember the little pocket calendars? I found the pocket calendar for my first year. I did 406 shows and I made $8,300
Wow.
for the year. $8,000. And you look back and you go, holy cow, how did I survive? But it never dawned on me not to do it. I loved it. And all these years later, I still love it. People say, why don't you retire? And I'm like, gosh, I still enjoy it. I mean, I
Mhm.
get to make people laugh, and I'm not naive enough to think laughter makes people's struggles go away, but laughter is kind of a release valve that allows people to put their burden down for a minute, kind of refresh themselves, and then they kind of pick it back up and they can go on.
Correct. So, so I'm going to stick on that 406 shows. That, so you,
About $20 a show.
So you were taking every gig you could get wherever.
Every every gig, Friday and Saturday nights, going two and three different places, to just get up and do 5 or 10 minutes. And then after that, I hit 5 years in a row. I did it, no, 8 years in a row. I did at least 500 shows. I was well, and I didn't have kids. So it was me and my wife, and she would just go with me. And because it was kind of, I didn't know the Malcolm Gladwell theory then, but it was kind of that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you get to be really good at it. And I didn't hang out in New York or LA. I was just on the road, and I would do Iowa one week and Kansas one week and Missouri. But I was on stage every night on Friday and Saturday nights multiple times. And I thought that's how I can get good at this is I got to do it every night.
Well, thank God for supportive wives. Amen.
Golly, no kidding.
Because I
I,
can
and
imagine.
I know a lot of funny people that had to quit because their support system at home, it's hard. They couldn't handle it. And I've just been blessed with such a capable wife. I could call home from the road and she would say, the hot water heater blew up this morning. And I'd go, oh my gosh. Okay. Well, as soon as I get back, she said, no, no, no. I got a new one. The guy came in, installed it. I mean, she
Mhm.
was very capable. She could handle anything. And I wouldn't have been able to do this if it hadn't have been for her.
So how many years before you had your breakthrough with like the Carson show and like how many years of the grind to get to just to that point?
Well, it was funny. My whole goal, of course, to young people, this wouldn't make sense, but my whole goal when I started was to be on Johnny Carson. Um, and I knew Johnny wasn't going to stick around forever. And the kind of the inside thing in comedy, people said it would take you 10 years to be good enough to be on Johnny Carson. And so I immediately challenged myself and said, okay, if they say it takes 10 years, I'm going to do it in 5. And that was part of the reason I was working like that.
Mm.
And I was living in Georgia, and I'd gotten to the point I was headlining everywhere across the country, but I would send tapes to the Tonight Show, and they wouldn't even open them. They'd just mail them back because I guess I lived in Smyrna, Georgia, and and finally one day my wife said, unless we go to LA, you're never gonna know what you could do with this. And boy, I didn't want to go to LA, but I did. And we'd been in LA for 2 weeks, and I was doing a set at the Improv. And when I finished the set, I walked back out into the lobby, and the talent coordinator for the Tonight Show followed me in the lobby and said, "How come you haven't been on the Tonight Show?" And I said, "Because you won't open my tapes. You keep mailing them back." And Jay Leno was a very big advocate for me, and he was kind of the guest host at that time. And he went to Johnny and said, "You need to put this kid on. This kid's funny." And so 3 or 4 weeks later, I was on Johnny Carson. And, it was funny when you went on there, you didn't meet Johnny before the show. And the kind of the thing was, they told you if he didn't like you, he would clap. If he liked you, he'd give you the big okay sign. And if he loved you, he would call you over to the couch. Well, it was funny. I got to the end of my 6 minutes and I was scared to look over there because it was kind of like Caesar, do you
Right.
live or do you die? And I looked over and he was waving me over to the couch and went over there and we talked and got a bunch of big laughs. And literally, and I don't know that there's anybody like this on TV now. If you had Johnny's blessing, it was like being coronated. I mean, within a week, I had Caesar's Palace calling, going, "Would you like the headline?" And all because Johnny likes you. And so he really was kind of a career maker. I remember going home that night and laying in the bed, couldn't go to sleep. I was just staring at the ceiling, going, I don't have a plan. That was all I ever wanted to do. I don't have a plan now.
Yeah, it's like you've climbed to the top of the mountain and
Yeah,
what
I put a flag in the top of Everest. Now what do you do? You know,
well, I would say for sure you learned that perseverance pays off because
I
it,
did. I
yeah,
did.
which is a
Hard,
powerful
hard,
thing.
hard work. Because there were people that were, when I started, that were funnier than me, just more naturally talented than me. But I worked at it. Like after the show, you'd go back to a lot of clubs had a condo where they would put the comics up in. A big percentage of the guys were chasing waitresses or going out and getting drunk every night. And I'd come back and I'd I'd sit there and write. I'd go over what had worked, what hadn't, and I just viewed it. This is my job. I'm self-employed, and there's not going to be anybody looking over my shoulder. If I'm going to be successful, I have to be self-motivated, and I worked at it, and I churned material out at a rate much faster than most people because I was working at
Right. All right. So hard work, perseverance. You've been doing it, what, 42 years now, you said?
it. Yeah.
So, so most of our listeners, most of our viewers, they know you from TV, they know you from comedy, they know you from tours you've done. But share with me some stuff that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of our listeners or viewers may not even know about. I know you helped lead a Bible study in Atlanta for a dozen years and involved in other things in ministry. Share what some of those experiences were like for you. And then I've got a specific one I want to ask you about, specific study.
Um, I got saved when I was 7 years old. Uh, and I vividly remember it being in church and they did the altar call and man, the Holy Spirit was just tugging me into the aisle and my mom had me by the collar and she said, and I'm like, Mom, I want to go down. She said, No, you're too little. You don't know what you're doing. And she wouldn't let me go down. And I guess I was hard headed then and I was arguing with her to the point that the preacher came over to the house that afternoon. And I remember him coming up to my room and sitting there and talking to me. And he went downstairs and he told my mother he knows exactly what he's doing. It's you need and I told my mom, we're going to Sunday night service. I ain't waiting until next week. I'm going down tonight. And I did. And then it was funny, Joe, 30 years later, 40 years later, God, more than that, 50 years later, I was doing a benefit for Young Life up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the preacher that was the preacher at that church showed up that night and he remembered me coming down and he had gone through his files and pulled the bulletin out where it had it in there from the next week. And he remembered having that conversation with me. So, the love of the Lord was instilled in me at a very early age. I had a weird upbringing because my mom didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't cuss, went to church 5 times a week. My dad, when I was little, was head of the deacons, went and did prison ministry and all. But my dad, his dad, literally one of those stories. When my dad was 5 years old, his dad said, Hey, I'm going out for a pack of cigarettes and never came back. They found him 20 years later in another state with another family. And somehow my dad went off the rails and left the prison ministry, left the church, and went out, ended up being married 6 times, drank, smoked, cussed, had a million affairs. And um, so I had that dichotomy as the mom was on one end of the spectrum and the dad was on the other end of the spectrum. And I think through my teenage years, got kind of tugged back and forth, like which end do you want to live on? Because it was fun going to see dad. There were no rules.
Right.
You could do whatever you wanted. Um, but I always think back to when you raise a child up in the Lord, he's not going to depart from that. He'll return to it. And I did. And I, you know, I think it influenced the type of comedy that I did, and I got to view this talent that I have as a gift, and I'm like, okay, if it's a gift, then you're supposed to honor that gift. You're supposed to do the right thing with it, and that meant taking any um, leverage that it gave me and use that for the right thing. So I had always been an outdoor kid. I've always bow hunted and fished and everything, just always loved all things hunting and fishing. So I started doing wild game dinners because
Mm,
I could go speak at churches and they'd have wild game dinners, kind of a ministry outreach things.
yeah.
And I could get people that would never, ever go to church that would come to hear me be funny for 30 minutes. And then I would roll it over into a story about Jesus. And so it was taking this gift that I had and drawing people in with it and then turning it around and share and and it was effective. I mean, we'd have nights where 2 and 3 thousand guys would show up, that a lot of them that would never set foot in a church. And then from that, it kind of expanded. I got tied in with Compassion International and started going on mission trips, not only locally, but around the world. I've been to Africa 6 times, been to South America like 3 or 4 times, Central America. And then from that, I had a guy invite me to the Atlanta mission. It was funny because I'd always done stuff. I had big ties to children with cancer. My aunt helped start Camp Sunshine, which was a camp for
Hmm.
kids with
Oh, yeah.
cancer. And my wife and I were head of fundraising for the Duke Children's Hospital. My brother played football at Duke. And for 18 years we did that. And I always was raising money for kids with cancer. But I had a guy invite me. I met a guy and he worked at the Atlanta mission and he invited me down there. And I had never thought about homeless people. Well, my thought was give them $5 at the stop sign and they'll leave you alone. And he invited me to come down there, and for some reason I went and did it. And I figured, well, he wants me to do a free concert and give them the money, or he wants me to do their commercial. Everybody wants something.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there at lunch with him at the mission, and the first homeless guy I ever got to know, uh, downtown Atlanta, this homeless mission, this kid named Jason. He was about 21 years old. And I looked at him and my thought was, Joe, I'm like, you're 21, you're totally healthy. Why the heck are you in a homeless mission? And I asked him that. I said, I love to know people's stories. I said, what's your story? Why are you here? And he said, well, he said it was me, my brother, my mom, and my dad. And when I was 11 years old, my mom killed herself. He said, in 2 or 3 years after that, my brother committed suicide. And it was me and my dad. And my second year of college, my dad killed himself. And he said, I had reached the point where I could not hurt anymore. And I started smoking crack and I fell out of college and ended up on the street. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I would have started smoking crack too. Everybody in your immediate family commits suicide.
Right.
And it was just a hurt he couldn't deal with. And he had to numb it and he became unemployable and he ended up on the street. Now, the cool thing is, for the last 18 years, he's been totally sober and he went back to college and got his nursing degree and he's been great. But so I asked the guy that invited me down to the mission after going down there a couple of times, I keep asking you, what do you want? What do you want from me? And he shocked me with the answer. He said, these guys have never had a small group Bible study. I want you to lead a small group. And I kind of laughed. I said, there's 6 million people in Atlanta. You can't find anybody more qualified to do this than me. And he and here's what I believe. The only thing that we can do for God is when he whispers to us, we can say yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And when I started, I couldn't even get guys to come. So I started going to Chick-fil-A when they would open. I'd be outside the door waiting on them to open. And I'd buy chicken biscuits. And I'd be like, if you'll come to my small group, I'll bring you a chicken biscuit. And I started off with 12 guys, just me and 12 guys. Half of them couldn't stay awake during it. And so I just started calling guys I knew, not necessarily close friends. And I'm like, I need help. I got a building full of homeless guys. I'm doing a small group. I needed guys to come down here and lead a small group. And Joe, over the next 2 or 3 years, it went from me and 12 guys to 25 group leaders and 250 homeless guys every Tuesday morning
Wow.
in every different spare room they had in the place. And we ended up doing that every week. I'd get up at 5 o'clock, no matter where I'd been on the road, and I'd go down there and do that. And we did it every week for 12 years until COVID hit.
Mm. Yeah, I want to, that's incredible. And that's just phenomenal to hear what God did with that and how it grew and how he used you and all those others. And like you said, sometimes we just have to say yes and be available and let God take.
And that's really the only thing you can do, you know. And yeah, I've heard people say, well, he doesn't call the equip, he equips the called. And that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had been in small groups for many years. I had done one for 17 or 18 years every Thursday morning in the back of a barbecue restaurant. And I had done uh, other ones with my wife, like couples things. But this first time I ever really led one.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I didn't want it publicized. I didn't want to be Jeff Foxworthy. And so people would say, "Hey, can we do a story about this?" And I'd go, "Please don't. This is a very intimate, personal thing.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I'm not doing it for publicity. I'm doing it because I feel like I'm supposed to do it. And if you publicize it, I don't want these guys to think I'm using them.
Right. For something that'll look good to the public. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always been kind of leery of people that when they do something kind, they've got a film crew with them. I'm like, well, what's the reason you're doing this?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so, yeah, for years and years, people go, I didn't know you did that. And I'm like, well, I didn't want you to know I did. You know? Uh,
Well, I want to go back to something you said at the start of that because a lot of those viewing or listening know exactly what you're saying when you use that term you were saved at 7 years old. But others may not. They don't come from, we both grew up in a Baptist church. We understand that terminology, but what does that mean to you? If you someone who's, never been in a church, never seen a Bible, what does that term mean to you?
well, I think probably the first move on the checkerboard is you have to decide, um, were we created or is this all a grand accident? And if it is a grand accident, the chances of it occurring are rarer than dropping all the parts to a 747 down a flight of stairs and them assembling themselves together and the plane flying.
Right.
Um, it's just even if you want to think two cells miraculously created and something life came from nothing, something came from there's no reproductive capability there. So even if one did it, it's got to be able to replicate itself. And it's got to be able to, when it comes together, not only to have a brain and a digestive system and a circulatory system, it has to have a reproductive system. It's not possible. Something doesn't come from, life doesn't come from nothing.
Correct.
And so then if you settle on a creator and everything you see behind me was created, everything. This computer was created, and it was created with a purpose. This microphone, somebody designed it and put it together with a purpose to transfer your voice. Well, if you if everything in this room was created except me, the most complicated and intricate thing in the room, that's crazy.
Correct.
So I'm like, no, this is not I'm not an accident. And so if I was created, I was created with a purpose. And what was that purpose? And I had a mom that grew up in the faith and talked about in the beginning we got separated from God in the garden through the devil. And if you really think about human beings, in fact, I was reading something. I was reading something this morning. Bear with me, but it said at one time, this is, whew, where am I? I'm in Titus. For goodness, I was just reading. It said at one time we were too foolish, disobedient, deceived, and enslaved by all kind of passion and pleasures. We lived in malice and envy, being hated and hating one another.
Mm.
That's kind of the natural human being, natural state of human beings. If you leave us to our own devices, we're always going to err to the wrong. We think about the wrong things. We want the wrong things. Um, that's just who we are. And so when you get to a point where you go, you know what? I can't control my thoughts. I can't control my desires. I need help. And in and of myself, because it says God can't be with that. God can only be with holiness. And I'm like, as hard as I want to be good, as hard as I want to be like that, to think good thoughts, to do good things, in and of my own, I can't do that. I need a savior, which is exactly what Jesus was. God said, all right, I'm going to create the law, which was the Ten Commandments, which we added onto, to show you,
Can't.
not for you to live up to this, but to show you you're not capable of doing this.
Right.
We do get envious of what other people have. We do steal. We do lie. We can't help it. We do all these things. And when you get to the point where you realize, yeah, you're right. The law shows me I can't do this. I need a savior. And God goes, got you covered on that, because I'm going to take my perfect son and I'm going to offer him as a sacrifice for you. And what you have to do is believe that I created you, that I am the creator, that I offered up a way for you to be with me. And he paid the price for you.
Yes.
And he rose again. So he defeated death, the thing that we all fear the most. And if you will believe in me and believe in him, you can have eternal life. Your spirit can live forever. And to me, that's what being saved is. And Christians are sometimes the worst advertisers on the planet for what it is we believe in. And that's because of our nature, is because in that moment of surrender, we're on our knees and going, I can't do this. I need a savior. And
Right.
God goes, got one. Here's Jesus. You go, please give him to me.
Yeah.
And the moment we stand up, we dust ourselves off and we go, yeah, I'm a mess, but I'm not as big a mess as she is, or I'm not as big a mess as he is. And we start comparing ourselves. And the Bible tells us all have sinned. That's what it says. All have.
Yes.
One sin separates you from God. So we're all a mess.
Right.
And none of us can have a relationship with God without that. And that's what the Bible says. Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
I'll agree
and
with
I
you.
think about that a lot, Joe, in this world we live in. I've started asking on stage, sometimes doing comedy and sometimes doing ministry related stuff. And I don't even know what I'm trying to get out of it, but I asked an entire room full of people, thousands of people, how many people trust your government? Do you know not one person has raised their hand?
Mm.
And then I go, how many people trust your media? Nobody raises their hand. I'm like, how many people trust the internet. Nobody raises their hand. And you're like, so we have become a people that expect to be lied to.
Yeah.
We expect to be lied to by our media, our government, social media, and we accept that. And I'm thinking, wouldn't that make all of us just hungry for the truth? What is the truth? And to think we have it figured out is so egotistical because that's making us the highest form of anything.
Right.
And we're not. We're all idiots. We're all coming to forks in the road 100 times a day and we're guessing left or right, left or right. And I tell people there is a God and you're not it. You don't have it figured out. And I think the secret to life, I totally believe the secret to life is this simple: letting go and going, I'm not in control. I don't know everything.
Mm.
But I follow somebody that is in control and he's not bound by time and he does know everything. But most of all, he loves me and he wants what's best for me because he created me and he gifted me.
Yeah.
And if I will let go of what I want and just trust him that the place we're going is going to be awesome. Are you going to have struggles till you get there? Absolutely. Everybody that's ever breathed a breath has struggles. But at one point Jesus said, I came so you could have life to the full.
Right.
And I think a lot of people view that as an insurance policy, meaning, okay, after I die, then I will go on and I get to go to heaven. I tend to view that it's life to the full, starting right at that moment,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
not just when we die, but now. To and when you do this, it is amazing. I do this a lot. I still do this when bad things happen in my life or I get somebody cuts me off in traffic. I'll be driving down the road, Joe, and I'll do this. I have one hand on the wheel and I'll go, let it go, let it go.
Mm.
And I open my hand. My mom falls again and hits her head back in the hospital. It's like, let it go. You're not in control of this. Um, Somebody good that you love gets some kind of awful form of cancer and it's going to let it go. And that's what God tells you. He goes, trust me enough. And it says that in the Lord's Prayer. Thy will be done. Not what I want, but what you want, because you see the big picture and I don't. So I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
And it's funny now when people ask me to pray for somebody, I say I'll do it. But what I don't say is, you might not like the way I pray, because the way I pray is, hey, God, if it was up to us, I really want her to be healed from this cancer so she can raise her kids and
Right.
go. But I don't see the big picture and I don't know what you're going to do with this. So what I'm going to pray is I'm going to trust you and your will be done here with her. If it's for her to stay here, hallelujah, that's great. But if you want her to go home, we're going to pray you get glorified in that.
Right. Right. Well, I wanted to touch on a story that I've heard you talk about that I know resonates with both of us. I've heard you tell stories a little bit about your background growing up, where you often, like you talked about the Ten Commandments, where often it was, here's a set of rules. If you don't follow them, you're bad, and and you're condemned if you can't follow all these rules, and you gotta, and like you said, the Ten Commandments, all the Old Testament law proved that we couldn't live up to that, which is the whole reason we needed Jesus to come. But share your thoughts on Luke chapter 15, as listeners often know it as the story of the prodigal son, but how that speaks to you, why that means so much to you, and what it can teach all of us.
Well, I was 9 years old when my dad left my mom for another woman, moved off, and it broke my heart. Um, because no matter what a parent says to a kid when a parent leaves, it says, you weren't worth sticking around for. That's the message the kid gets. And I wanted a dad that was there, and I wanted a dad that understood me, that understood what my gifts were and what my shortcomings were, and that would discipline me in that to not let me wander too far. And I didn't have that. And so Luke 15, if and there's somebody listening to this that is not of faith, and I'll put this challenge down to you because you can Google it on your phone. It's the story of the prodigal son, and I think it's the greatest piece of literature ever written. And for anybody listening, go Google it. It's about 2 paragraphs.
Right.
That's all you have to read. It's about 2 paragraphs, but it's one of the last things Jesus shared uh, before he was crucified. And so you're thinking, all right, he knows he's going to be crucified. So you're thinking, here in those last days, he's probably thinking, all right, I'm about to leave here. What can I tell these guys that is the most important? So he shares this parable of a father that had 2 sons, and the youngest son goes to him and says, I want my inheritance now, which in the Eastern custom was the same as saying, I wish you would die. You're not dying fast enough. I wish you were dead. Give me my money. And the father does it, and the son takes it. And just like we would do today, he goes off and he spends it on all the wrong things, on wine, women, and song. And he blows through it. And now he has no money left. And he has a job feeding seed pods to pigs,
Mm.
and he's envying what the pigs are eating because he has no money and he's that hungry. And he says to himself, you know what? I've seen the people that work for my dad on his land eat better than I do. I'm going to put my hat in my hand, go back and tell my dad, I've sinned against you. Please hire me to work on the family land.
Mm.
So he turns and he starts towards home. And this is one of my favorite parts. It says, while he was still a long way away, the father saw him and went running towards him. Well, you don't see something a long way off unless you're looking for something a long way off.
Yeah.
So even though the son had said, I wish you were dead, give me my money, and the father did it, and the kid blew it, the father's looking for him on the horizon, and he sees him and he runs to him and he says, go get the robe and the family ring
The fatted
and
calf.
kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a celebration. I often do a joke about who was not happy to see the son turn towards home, and the answer is the fatted calf. The fatted calf's like, oh no. Uh, so the father does a celebration because the son has turned and has come back to him. Well, the other son that had stayed and had done everything the father had asked gets pissed because he's like, you gave him the money, he blew it on all the wrong things, and I've sat here and I've done everything you've asked me to do, and you've never thrown a party for me, and I'm not coming to the party. And
Mm.
the father says, son, everything I have is yours,
Right.
everything. But your brother was dead and now he's alive again, or he was lost and now he's found, and we're going to celebrate. And so to me, it's called the prodigal son, but really what the story is about who the father is.
Yeah.
And so what the father says in this story is, you cannot do anything bad enough to make me not love you. And you can't do anything good enough to make me love you more than I do.
Right.
I just love you both with all that I have. And I think that is the most beautiful picture of God, that even at our worst, he still adores us. And at our best, he's like, you can't perform well enough to make me love you more. This is who I am. And it says God is love. I just love you.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's the kind of dad I need, the kind of dad that's there every day, the kind of dad that's looking on the horizon for me. And I just decided at a young age, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let God be my daddy. And crap, Joe, I'm 66 years old and I still have evenings when I go, Daddy, can I just crawl up in your lap? Will you just rub my head? Because the world's beating me up today.
Yeah.
Just let me sit in your lap and rub my head. And I really view him as my father.
Yes. And I love the point you made. I often use the analogy that people will sometimes say, well, I've distanced myself so far from God. And I just say, no, all you got to do is turn around and you'll see
Yeah.
who's there waiting for you.
Yeah.
They say, oh, I've turned my back on. I was like, well, turn around and guess who will be there waiting, who's waiting on you. It doesn't matter how far you've gone. You cannot outrun the love of God.
I can't, do we have time for me to tell you a quick
Oh, yeah,
story?
sure.
So when I started doing the small group at the mission, we had one guy in the group. He was huge. I mean, like bodybuilder, huge. And he was angry, and I was scared. I was scared of him. Only guy in the room I was scared of. His name was Wayne, and I had a guy that had come in to help me with the study. We call him Chicken Man. That's all you need to know. So uh, I was asking him one day what the Bible was, just trying to get them to think, get out of their fog. And one guy said, "Well, it's a book of rules." And Chicken Man stood up. There was a garbage can in the room, and he slid it to the middle of the room, and he walked over and he dropped his Bible in the garbage can.
Mm,
And everybody kind of recoiled, and he said, "What?" He goes, "If it's just a book of rules, that shouldn't bother you."
mm,
And big old Wayne got up and walked over there and pulled that Bible out of the trash can. He wiped it off. He said, "Don't do that again."
mm,
And and I said, "Wayne, why would that bother you?" And for the first time, Wayne shared his story. He said, "My mother died and there was an insurance policy and I got $70,000." He said, "I had never had money in my life." He said, "I lost my mind." He said, he said, "I got two girlfriends. We started partying." He said, "Eventually I ended up smoking crack." He said, "And after a week or two, I lost my job because I wasn't showing up to work."
mm,
He said, "But we were partying because I had money to blow." And he said, "But because I lost my job, I couldn't pay my rent or wasn't paying my rent. I got kicked out of my apartment." He said, "So me and these two girls," he said, "I put my stuff in three or four suitcases and a couple of backpacks, and we were bouncing from cheap motel to cheap motel around Atlanta, just partying night and day, smoking crack." He said, "And in one of those backpacks, he said, the only thing I had from my mom was a Bible that she had given me as a kid." He said, "And in the front cover of it, she had written this little love letter to me about why this was important."
mm,
He said, "And then bouncing from hotel to hotel, I realized at one point I'd lost that backpack, lost the Bible, it was gone." He said, "But we didn't care. We were high and we were partying." He said, "And after a while, as it happens, the money ran out." And he said, "When the money ran out, the girls left." And he said, "Now I got a crack habit and I'm on the street." And so he was on the street for about a year and a half. And one day a guy stopped and said, "Hey, I need some physical labor. I'll pay you guys." So he got Wayne and another guy. And this guy had bought an old apartment building about 100 miles from Atlanta. And he drove them down there. He said, "I need to clean out these old apartments so I can renovate them
mhm,
and rent them out." And he said, Wayne said, "I was on the bottom floor, other guys on the top floor." He said, "I cleaned my half out. I went upstairs to check on that guy." And he said, the guy had it pretty well cleaned out, except for there was a pile of stuff in the corner. And he said, "What's that stuff?" And the guy said, "It's stuff that might be worth something." He said, "There were, alarm clocks and a few pieces of clothing." He said, "And there was a few books over there." And Wayne said he walked over there and he's looking through it and it's covered in dirt and all. And he picks up one of the books and shakes it off and he opens it. And it's his Bible
wow.
from 100 miles away a year and a half later. And he opens it and there's that love letter from his mother. And he said, "I dropped to my knees and I start sobbing, just start sobbing." And I figured if God was going to chase me that hard that I needed to quit running. Um, And if you put that in a movie, people would say, that's not believable. That's not believable
Right.
that 100 miles away and a year and a half later, the book that he picks up is the Bible that he lost with a love letter from his mother in it. He still got it. Um,
I'm
and
sure.
that's who God is.
Yeah.
God's like, yeah, I mean, I know you're as wild as the prodigal son. You've been living with two women. You become a crackhead. You're living on the street. You're stealing. You're doing whatever. And I still want you.
Mhm.
I still you're my kid. I adore you. You can't do anything bad enough to make me love you any less.
Mhm.
And so it's not just a theory. You don't have to look hard to see it played out. Bono said one time the best songs are either people running away from God, the best stories are either people running away from God or running back to God.
Mhm.
And that's what we're all doing. You're either running one direction or the other. I used to tell Ron White that. I said, you're either living in a state of humility or you're headed towards one.
Yeah. It's like you're in a storm or you're headed to one or you just got out of one.
Yeah. And that's every single one of us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, I'm going to switch gears here, talking about fathers. Father's Day is coming up,
Hmm.
and I like you. My kids were born in the '90s,
Hmm.
and I can't imagine for you, your career was taking off then.
Hmm.
How in the world did you juggle? Work-life balance is probably a comical term to use for what you had to experience then. How in the world did y'all balance a rising career, fame, and trying to and bringing two kids? How far apart are your girls?
About 3 years. Um, you know what? It was funny. 15 years ago, a lady was interviewing me, and she said, "Okay, you paint, you draw, you do stand up, you host award shows, you host Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, you write books. Which one are you?" And I thought, that's a weird question. And I said, well, all the things you mentioned are things that I do. And I love what I do. I've been gifted to do this. I try to honor it, but I love what I do. But who I am, you ask which one am I? Who I am is I am a child of God, and I am a husband, and I am a father, and I am a son, and I'm a brother, and I'm a person in my community. That's who I am. And so what I do may change many times in my life, but hopefully who I am stays consistent through all of that. And and I did that with my kids. I knew what it felt like to have a dad that wasn't there. And now I've got a job I can't do it at home. I have to go on the road to do my job. So I started leasing a plane. And if I had a show in St. Louis on Friday night, I'd fly out at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I'd go do that show and I'd walk off stage and I'd get back on that plane and I'd fly back to Atlanta. And I'd get in at 2 in the morning and I'd get up at 6 and I'd take my girls to their softball game or their basketball game or to school or whatever and pick them up from school. And then I'd get back on that plane and I'd fly to Minnesota and I'd do this. And I did this for 12 years.
Yeah,
Back,
I remember hearing a story from one of your daughters saying they would remember you coming in, on a Saturday to make sure you could be at church with them on Sunday, and
oh yeah,
that was just
oh
normal.
yeah. I do the show in Minnesota, fly back, get home 2:30 in the morning, but we get up and go to church on Sunday. I didn't want what I did for a living to affect how I was as a father.
Yeah.
And it was giving me 100 more days a year with my girls. Well, now my girls are in their 30s. My girls call me or text me or see me every day of my life. So was it worth it? Yeah. I turn down movies for a lot of, I remember turning down a movie because I would have had to have gone in the summertime, film it for 7 weeks in Toronto. And I said, I'm not giving away 7 weeks of my girl's summer. I got 5 more years while they're at home. I'm not giving one of them away. I'm not giving a summer away. So I turned down money and I just kind of trusted, okay, God, I'm gonna turn this down, but if I'm trusting you, you'll find a way for me to get by.
Right.
And he did. And fatherhood changed my life. It really did. From the moment I became a father, I became so responsible that I'm like, okay, you you got to be wise because these people depend on you. And it's got such a great gift. And you think, okay, if we were created, why did God let us have children? Why didn't he just stop with Adam and Eve and have that
Right.
relationship with them? And it's just a guess on my part, but I think he let us have kids so we had a tiny, tiny inkling of how he feels about us.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I get you. I'll never forget. My son was born September 14th of 93. He was our first. And my daughter was born April 5th of 97. And I still remember the first alone time I had with either one of them. I don't mean in the delivery, but I remember going in, holding them. I remember the first time my son Josh opened his eyes and looked at me, and I was just like, this weight of responsibility just hit me. Like, I was like, oh my goodness, I have such a responsibility now. And same thing when I held my daughter Allison for the first time. I was in a room with her and I was like, oh, now we've got two, and wow, the responsibility. And you know,
It,
agree.
but in a great way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's no joy that can compare to, I said on my first episode of this show, greatest achievement of my life is getting to be a dad to Josh and Allison, and nothing else I can ever achieve in any field will compare to getting to be a father.
Absolutely. And that I knew what it felt like to grow up without a dad. So my number one thing, I wasn't going to let my girls ever feel that. To the point, like even when we were doing the blue collar tour, and after the show, the other guys would say, "Hey, we're going to go down to the bar and have a beer." Well, I don't think having a beer makes you a bad person. But I came from a father that had a million girlfriends.
Mm.
And I knew if I went in there and had a beer with them and we started laughing and cutting up, that I might have two beers. And if I had two, I might have three. And then I knew if somebody really pretty with good cologne sat down next to, or good perfume sat down next to me, I might find them attractive and I might end up doing exactly what my dad did, which cost me my relationship with my dad. And so I would tell myself, you know what, be wise. And I would go, no, guys, I'm going up the room. I'm ordering room service and calling home. Not because I was a prude, not because I thought I was better than them. I was just trying to be wise. And I'm going, don't put yourself in a situation where you could screw up the thing that's most important to you. And and I didn't. So that just kind of that responsibility of being a father just kind of boy, really focused the rest of my life.
Mm. So, yeah, juggling for someone else who's on the road a lot, not me, but for other listeners, how did you make the most of, time with your wife, time with the kids, but also maintaining your career? What advice would you give to someone? Maybe it's a businessman who's traveling all the time.
Yeah.
What kind of guidance would you try to give them?
Just, I mean, God tells us walk is wise, not unwise. And so, and I think we are called to work hard. We're gifted and we're called to work hard. And I think I always I'm a picture person in my mind. Is I picture that little, I guess they're called an abacus, but the little bead on the rod.
Mhm.
One side is work and one side is family. And I, Joe, I picture a man's entire life. You're doing this.
Yeah.
I'm working too much. I'm not working enough. I'm not. But it all comes down to priorities, and you have to think what's the most important. So to me, the priority was my wife and my kids. So you get offered a movie and you're like, boy, this is a lot of money. But to get a lot of money, I'm going to have to give up a summer with my family. Which one's the priority? And it was the family. And I think as a man, you have to be really honest with yourself. And even if you got to sit down and write it down and go, what's the priority of my life? Because when I die, I don't give a crap if it mentions that I was a comedian or that I wrote books or that I want people to say, man, he was a good dad. He was a good husband. He was a good steward of what was given to him. He was a good member of this community, a good son, a good brother. Um, and the rest of it will take care of itself. But I think as a man on the road, watch the situations you put yourself in. Don't be out to dinner with just a woman because, man, we're all fallible. It doesn't take long for that to go off the rails, you know? Um, Go order room service, go call home, go do your business, and go to bed. Um, Walk is wise because, and you don't have to look very far. Look at, because you see good people. I know a lot of really good men that have blown up their lives by just starting to veer off a little bit. And you don't usually go off the road at 90 degrees. You go, well, I can go have dinner with her. Okay, we're having dinner. I can have a drink with her. Okay, we're sitting there kind of flirting, and that's how it happens. But I know a lot of good men that have messed up their entire lives
Mhm.
by doing something like that. And somebody told me one time, they said, trust is like a cup of coffee. It brews a drop at a time. You fill the cup up slowly. But to lose trust, you empty it all at once. And I can tell you for a fact, once you get to the point, like with my father, where you don't trust somebody, it's really hard to ever fill that coffee cup up again. So do you want, as a man, do you want to break that trust with your kids? Do you want your kids to spend the rest of your life saying, I thought I knew who this man was, but I was wrong? Do you want your wife to go, I thought I knew who this man, but I was wrong? And that was, man, really important to me. It was, no, they're more important than how much I make or how famous I am, which is kind of weird because I'm in a job that, you know, people knowing who you are is tied to how much you make. But it worked out.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I close every episode with this phrase. I say, Jesus loves you and you were made for more,
Hmm.
which comes from a song I sang recently. But if a listener's listening today, they don't know what that's like. They don't know what the love of God is like. They doubt that their life was really made for more. They doubt that God had, I say, for I know the plans I have for you to bless you, not to harm you.
Yeah.
And I quote that, but some people haven't experienced that. Some don't believe that. So if you're sitting having coffee with someone and they're like, Jeff, I don't really, I just don't feel that love. I don't believe that God could have plans for me. Maybe it's because of their past. Maybe it's because of their present. What words would you share with them to say, hey, God's not done with you. God's got plans for you. God loves you. How would you communicate to that person if they presented that question to you?
One of the interesting things about being a comedian is I obviously have this thick Southern accent, but I can go anywhere and I can go to Chicago, I can go to New York, and I can make people laugh because what you do as a comedian is you're always looking for, even though we grew up in different places and different, what do we have in common?
Hmm.
You're looking for that common thread. And here's what every human being has in common. We all want to be loved,
Yeah.
and we all want to be significant. We all want to be worth something, right?
Sure.
It's funny, Joe. I never say to God, and I'll say it out loud. I said it this morning. I was walking the dog and I walked past this blue azalea bush, and these, God, they were just so pretty. There's just this vibrant blue, and you think, okay, if everything's created, why was that created? Well, you know why that was created? It was created for my enjoyment.
Hmm.
And I looked at the bush and I went, I love you too. And so when I say that to God, I always say, I love you too. And the reason I say I love you too is because He said it first,
Yes.
just like your wife. I love you. I love you too. He said it first because we all want to be worth something. And what happened with Jesus, God wasn't just saying, you're worth something. God's saying, you're worth everything
Yeah.
to me.
Right.
You're worth everything. As I'm going to take my perfect son who has never sinned, and I'm going to let him spit on him, hit him.
Yeah.
Man, it'll get me choked up. I'm going to let him beat him with a whip 40 times and split his back open. I'm going to let him put a crown of thorns into his head. I'm going to let him nail his hands and his feet to a cross. And I'm going to let him take the punishment that you deserve for right relationship with me so I can be with you.
Mm. That's
You're not worth something. You're worth everything to me.
yes.
And all you have to do is believe that. And when you do, you can't help but live but in a state of humility. Going, man, you love me that much? That much. That's all I ever wanted.
Right.
Right? That's all I ever wanted. And you're offering it to me.
Yes.
I've got a vault full of treasure, and all I have to do is believe it. I don't have to perform for it. When I screw up, I don't lose it because I believe you love me that much.
Yes. And any God who would love us that much also has incredible plans for our lives.
Yes, yes. What would you want for your kids? And I think about that with laughter. I think about when my kids are around me and my kids are laughing as a father, just fills my heart to see them enjoying each other.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what he meant life to the full is, and he tells us over and over again, don't be anxious. I got it. I got it. I know the plans I have for you. The end of the story is wonderful. So even if it looks bad right now, you win. It's
Yes.
and he tells us no mind has conceived, no eyes have seen the wonderful things that he's got for us. You can't even imagine it in your head. And I believe that with all my heart.
Agreed. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Hmm. I love you too. Look up and go, I love you too, because I believe you love me.
Yes. Well, Jeff, it's been an absolute blast to have you on today. And I know our listeners, I've been blessed personally, and I know our listeners will be as well. And I'm so excited for, the last thing I was going to ask was because I see it, and people ask me all the time. I've been doing baseball cards for 34 years. You've been doing comedy for 42 years. And as you said, so I think you basically already touched on this. What keeps you going? I know it keeps me going, but you could sit at home, but yet you're still out on the road. You're still doing what you love. And for someone who's bogged down in their career, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't do it as much as I used to. I'm out of the 500, but I still enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that used to be my fear, Joe, is I would say to my wife, don't let me be the old comic that's up there and nobody thinks he's funny anymore. And my wife goes, okay, you keep your ears open. She said, listen, they'll tell you when you're not funny anymore.
Right.
And, you know, I did a show Saturday night, and at the end of an hour and a half, I said, God bless you, thank you, good night. And 1,800 people stood up in unison. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm still funny, you know.
Ralph,
But I'm watching,
you
I'm
still got it.
listening. Uh, I'm watching and I'm listening, but I still enjoy it. And it's still, I like people. I like to hear people's stories. And so I meet a ton of people on the road, you know. I remember I had a buddy. He always had the biggest grin on his face. And people would say to him, "You're always in a great mood. Why are you always in a great mood?" He said, "Well, if you really want to know, I'll stop and take the time to tell you." Well, he was a believer, and he believed that, hey, this ends good.
Yes.
This ends really good.
Yes, it does. All right. Well, thank you again, Jeff. I'm going to be
You bet.
praying for your mom for sure.
Thank you.
And
Well, she's going home anyway, It's that last episode in the hospital, she had a moment in the emergency room. She looked at me and she said, uh, this might be it. And I said, well, if it is, you've been a fabulous mother. Uh, you've had a great life. A lot of people have loved you. You've influenced a lot of people, and I'll see you when I get there. And, to me, that's part of that hope we carry is there's a
absolutely.
lot more, there's a lot more to us than just this place that we're in right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great catching up. Again, greatly appreciate you coming on the show. I know everyone's going to enjoy this as much as I have, and we'll have to have you on again soon. And remember, listeners, as I close, Jesus does love you. As Jeff has shared, he loved you so much to give his life for you, and your life was made for more. Thanks so much, everyone.